Hello and welcome back to the School of Self-Worth. Did we leave you hanging last week with the first episode with dating coach Andi Forness? It truly was so good, was it not? I loved that whole conversation with Andi. And today is even better because today you'll get to hear me talk about what it was like to actually apply what Andi taught me when I started dating my husband, Michael. This gets personal. I'm sharing some of the earliest conversations we had that were formative to the relationship that we built today. I don't hold anything back, so make sure you tune in. And if you are a high achieving career woman who wants to unlock her own roadmap to personal power, DM me power on Instagram. I've got something for you. Okay, let's do this. So when I started working with you, Andi, I would think I was about 6 months post separation. I was not fully divorced yet.
Right.
It was like a month before COVID, but we didn't know that. And so I was like, okay, here I go. And I totally was like in that New Year energy and I started to swipe. And I
You're
got
doing all the
matches and with
walks. All your
people.
dates were walk
They were
dates.
all walks because it was all during COVID, totally. But at the time, I remember, I don't know if you remember this guy, but I distinctly remember I had a phone call with him because this is one of the first things Andi teaches us to have a phone call with him. And I was on the phone with him and I found him kind of boring. And she totally drilled me on that. And she's like, why is he boring? I was like, I don't know. There's just something in his voice. I just don't even really know if I want to go on a date. And for whatever reason, this guy was going on a trip. And then when he came back, we were going to go on the date. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. But then while he was gone, he actually sent me a photo of a whale that he had seen on the trip that he had taken. I don't know if he had been diving or what. And he sent it to me. And I told you, and you're like, that doesn't sound very boring. I was like, what? Just being called on my stuff right away. I was like, oh, and that didn't work out, but it was like a
Right.
really good lesson for me and how I was being super perfectionist. I was being very like dismissive of people because we hadn't even gone on a date. Like I had no
Right.
idea what this
Right.
guy was about, but I was already peremptory, like, nope, not him. Even though he had done all he had messaged me back. We'd had a phone call. He'd
Right.
been very like
He'd given up that
active.
time. Totally.
Totally. Yeah. So I remember learning all of these things and one of the things I learned along the way really was to start to state my preferences and then
Yep.
to also see what they did with it. And can you talk a
Hmm.
little bit about that? Like
Oh,
you state
yes,
your
absolutely.
preferences and then what is that drawing in and what is that showing you about the person you're talking to?
Right. So one of the things that when I just used chemistry as like a default, yes, the chemistry would be there. They were hot, probably lasted like 3 months maybe. And then you just got into like a regular relationship, just like everyone else. But yet those people weren't necessarily everyone that I work with now, and because they've done some sort of self-help, but if you're coming through Nicole, you have as well. You want someone that is evolved, right? You
Mhm.
want somebody that has done some work on themselves. And I'll always say this too, doesn't one of the ways that you can tell if you're going to be in a good relationship is how someone responds, right? When like you want things to come up. That way you get to see how that person reacts. And I come from a background of managing things, people pleasing, keeping the peace, not saying anything, me handling everything so that my partner doesn't know, doesn't. I've always had to avoid conflict because conflict in the past has been usually very traumatic. So I've been conflict avoidant. But what I realized that also there's no power in that either, right? There's no like self confidence or anything when you are constantly like scared. Um, and so what I realized also during dating is this is a great place for me to see how the person in front of me handles my wishes, how
Mm.
they handle conflict, how they handle me expressing maybe I didn't like something, how I can also compromise. This actually came up with a client recently. Like she asked for the video call. He didn't like the idea of the video call. And so then she had to compromise. He suggested a phone call. And so it's like this whole thing of you get to once you are more authentic about yourself and not such a people pleaser, or conflict avoidant, you actually get to see early how you and this
Mm.
person can work together or talk about things. And it's literally the basis for a really good relationship is, can this person hear what I want? Doesn't mean that they're going to agree, right? But can I be heard, right? That's like everyone's desperate to be heard.
And what you're saying is, so this is the growth journey, because I loved what you said at the beginning when you're talking about, like, if you're not in the relationship you want, that's because you're not ready for it yet.
Right.
And when you start to be able to do things like say what you need, you start to become the person who is ready for the person
Exactly.
who comes in with you. And it took me a long time to see this, because I dated for like a year and a half before I met my husband, Michael. And I would struggle with some of these things sometimes. Like, how do I start to say what I want, to be clear, and then to keep owning it over and over again? And then being with guys who are open to it and we're open to
Right.
saying yes. And then
Right.
me also understanding that, yeah, giving them the time and space for the relationship to start to evolve. Because then by the time I met Michael, I was actually ready for the relationship we created. But it is interesting what you're saying. And it really was for me. This is why I get back to self worth a little bit, because I didn't feel worthy of it. Like, I didn't feel worthy of the kind of person who would treat me that well and who would like really honor everything I needed at all times, like on a deeper level and an emotional level. Because what I really wanted was like an emotionally available guy. This is like, the unicorn of the dating world. Everyone's like, I want an emotionally available
Right.
guy. I want an evolved guy. And now I understand what Andi was teaching me was like, well, I want someone who is going to be with me on the pathway, which is not the same thing. Cause like, you don't need someone who's actually been through self development, but someone
Right.
who is aware enough that they can meet you and match you and is willing to match
Right.
you along the way,
Maybe
right?
they've maybe they've grown up in an environment where they were able to talk about things. I will say my two sons, we've because I have done my self work, I've passed down, and now I have a generation where we can get in some kind of kerfluffle, and we are good. Like, I respect their boundaries, they respect mine, and I get hugs. Like the other day, I was crying about something, and my son came over and like gave me like a big hug, and like, and
Mm,
so yeah, maybe they didn't do a bunch of self work. Maybe they grew up in an environment that actually nurtured them, like talking about things and being there for people. And so
totally.
you
And
want
I,
to nurse
yeah.
that out at the beginning. Like, that's a really big part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I learned how to just start to spot the things that mattered early that would just be an indicator that we could do things later,
Yeah.
right? And have the relationship that we have. Okay, great. Well, let's fast forward a little bit, because I will have to say the first month and a half that I was dating Michael were probably like the biggest personal challenge I had that whole year, because it was like, it was really, he was challenging for me, and not because he is a challenging person. It was because I was challenged by a lot of the things that occurred when we started to date. So I'll share a little bit with everyone, and then Andi and I can talk about where she came in for me on that one. So I had her whole system down. I had messaged him. I had set good boundaries. And we had our first date, and it was really nice. And it was just one of those. It was like really nice. I was like, I like this guy. I'd like to go out with him again. I did Andi's protocol at the end of the date. I said, I'd love to do it again. And he said, yeah, okay. And then he set up our next date. And this was the beginning of some of the patterns of how he communicates, which is not actually that frequently. And I was not used to that. Like, I was used to someone who would
Right.
like text me or message me all the time. And Michael is really not into any kind of phone. Like, he deletes social media off his phone because he doesn't like it. Like, he just deleted his Instagram app and his account. And I was like, wow, you can just do that. Like, he's just very like hands off with that kind of stuff. And so he didn't message me. And I would just be like, does he like me? Does he want to do this? What would happen? But on our first date, he told me he didn't message me before the first date. And I remember messaging him like an hour before. I'm like, are we still meeting? Because most people would confirm. And he's like, oh, yeah, of course. And then on our first date, he said, well, if I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'll be there. And I was like, oh, well, that's the kind of person I want. I don't need someone who
Yeah.
texts me all the time. If they're
Right.
going to just be where they say they're going to be, or set the date up that they say they're going to set, right? And so
Right.
this is where I had to start to understand, like, texting every day is not the equivalent of a person with integrity who does what they're going to say that they're going to do.
Right.
And so this was happening. And then we started to date. And on our second date, same thing happened again. It was really great. It was super fun. And now I'm starting to feel like I like this person. We do it again. We go on a third date. And then after our third date, he didn't set up the next date. And I had a total freak out. I was like, I don't know if he likes me. Now I really like him. I'm not sure what's next. And then I was like, Andi, SOS, help. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And I remember, do you remember that conversation we had, that coaching session?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad you remember it. But I remember I called you and I kind of freaked out for a while. And so what she said was like, well, do you like him? And I said, yes. And she said, okay, well, what I want you to do is get on the phone and have a conversation with him and tell him the things that you need. Like, tell him what your preferences are, what you need. She's like, you can tell him you like him, tell him you need him to text you more. And then at the time, we had been seeing each other just once a week. And she's like, and I wanted to see him a little more. And she's like, and then tell him you want to see him more than once a week. And at that time, I wasn't into commitment. We were only 3 dates in, but I was still freaking out a little bit. So you're like, tell him all those things. So I'm curious. And then you were like, see what he does with that. See what he does when you call him, tell him that. And so I'm curious if you could give the lens of what you were seeing for me by stating myself so clearly to someone really new to me at the time.
Yeah. So it's not okay. So part of it is dating, but the other part is our tendency to not, how do we get out of assuming?
Mm.
And that's where that rational analytical mind is, right? It's like constantly like going, this, that, and the other, trying to figure out why did he not set up the next date? Why? And what I'd love for people to do is to just you know how you can take all that off the plate? By getting on the phone with someone and actually having a conversation with them. Like, you can avoid all of that mental, because all of that is not good for your self-worth.
No.
All of that like story and wonder and worry, like none of that is good for your self-worth. And so once I start to ever see myself like going down some like spiral, I have to like stop. Even with my partner that I'm with now, like we're in 5 years, but if I see some kind of like downward spiral, I have to like get on the phone and say, hey, this might sound crazy or whatever, but I need to talk to you through this a little bit. And he's like, okay, can we do it after work? I'm like, sure, right? So it's like, that's number one for your self-worth, is stop this. Once you find out you're spiraling, you have to actually like ground down and get like some facts. So that was number one. The second part was one thing that women that are protecting themselves for whatever reason, they've been hurt before, they're trying new behaviors, a lot of times I cannot tell you how many times I was told like years later that I was not, even though I liked someone, I wasn't giving out any vibe, and they didn't know. And I probably probably some really good guys just kind of fell off because I was not giving any sort of vibe. And so I think that's the other part too, is especially if we are, yeah. So that's the other part is like, and then 3, we're all hearing this, be vulnerable. That's how we connect, right? So it was really more like those 3 things. Oh, and then the 4th thing was you had a boundary. That's for your self-worth. Like, you wanted to see if this guy was available. You weren't just going to be in default to what he thought a relationship, because a relationship really is 2 people and their wants, and you work together. And what I see a lot of times is women that have overgiven, like in their previous relationship, then they go this way and they don't want to give anything and they want the guy to do it all. And what I want everyone to just remember is there's actually 2 people. If someone's on a dating site, they've probably been hurt. They're just like you. They've probably been told that they've been doing things wrong, and I'm putting that in air quotes. They also are coming with baggage. They might not, show it, but they have, right? Especially at this age. And so it's just really important to be like clear and direct. and vulnerable with like what's going on, just to see if that other person is even available. They might not be, but at least you haven't wasted a bunch of mental energy or physical energy. That's why I really believe it at the beginning.
Well, what you taught me and showed me was so important because one of my big reflections from my previous relationship is that I was not emotionally available. I love to say he wasn't, but the truth was I was not either. And so in this case, now here I was facing this idea to be emotionally available, which is to tell someone that I like them, which
Mm-hmm.
is the most emotionally available thing you can really do early on. And I was literally terrified, Andi. You told me to do this, and I'm like sweating buckets. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to call. I texted, I said, can we have a call? And he said, yeah, of course. And we referenced it actually in our wedding ceremony because it was such an important call. And it was actually a really short call. Like I called him, I said, okay, I have 4 things I need to tell you. And the first one is that I need to have this call. And he was like, okay. And then the second one is, I like you. Because you said, I remember you told me this, asking me if he's available to continue dating. Because it wasn't just that I liked him. It was like, I
Right,
like
because he
you.
didn't make that next date.
He
Right.
didn't make the next date and he didn't make it clear. And I said, I like you. And I wanted to know if you're available to keep dating. And he said, yes, immediately. And I said,
Can I
okay,
stop
great.
you?
Yes, please.
You're not asking him for long-term committed relationship. You're not
No.
asking him for marriage, and that's what I think ever the big fear is. You can break dating down into like manageable chunks so it doesn't become overwhelming. It's not really that weird, people, to ask someone, do you want to continue dating and getting to know each other? It's a really small ask.
Mm-hmm.
And I think women make these small asks, these really big things, and it should not be a big ask. So that's another thing.
It felt like a big ask of
I
me,
know,
not of him.
but
And
not for him.
totally. And it wasn't for him. It was for
Right.
me to be like, okay. And then the second thing I said is like, I would like to text more. Like, I'd like to have more messages. And he said, well, I don't really like texting, but I'll send you some gifts or jokes. And I said, okay, great, fine. And then I wanted to see him more. And he's a teacher. And it was the beginning of the year. And he said, well, it's going to have to be a couple of weeks. And then I'll try to do that. And I said, okay. And it was literally 5 minutes. And then it was done. And now I'll tell you now. So the context of this, the reason he didn't set up another date is because he was freaking out a little bit because he really liked me and he didn't know what to do. And he was also dating other people. And so he felt stressed. And that's why he didn't do it. And then when I did that, and he has, dated a bunch, just like so many of us. And he said, I was the first woman who has ever done that in all of his experience, who has said and stated clearly what I wanted from him and made it really easy for him. And it is the reason he kept dating me.
That's
Isn't
awesome.
that, yeah, I don't know if you knew that,
Yeah.
but he always says that. He's like, oh yeah, that was the reason I decided to go with you because it was different. And he had already been feeling it, but that confirmed that. And I would say too,
And
and it's, yeah, I'll go for it.
well, now I'm just thinking out loud, like strong women, that's how you're going to get a man that once you're yourself and you're not afraid to say things and you say things all the time in your regular world, like you're in your job or you're with your friends or your family or your whatever, like we say things to all the time, but then for some reason, right, like that's how you're going to get a person that will give you all the things and be up at your level, but you can't hide that part of you. You can't, like, you that is, he picked you because you were strong, and he's like,
Exactly.
strong meets strong, right? Open means open. Somebody that somebody that if you would have done that and he would have I'm just thinking the counter of him, like a how do I say it, a not as emotionally developed or strong man could have been able to handle that, right?
Right.
And
Right.
you would have gotten somebody that they would have disappeared,
For
right?
sure.
And
Yeah.
so, anyways, that's huge. That's great.
Yeah. And it also set the tone for our relationship because I am never afraid to talk to him about hard things
Yeah.
because I know how he'll handle it. He'll handle it like that. He's very calm and he listens. And sometimes he responds right away, sometimes he doesn't. But I don't ever
Hmm.
feel afraid to talk to him. I might feel afraid of like this topic feels hard or this feels
Sure.
really big, but I'm never afraid of how he's going to be about it. Because
That's
that night he
awesome.
showed me, he was like walking
Yeah.
to the grocery store and chatting with me and he's like, "Yeah, sounds great." It was fine, right? And then we set up our next date from that, and then that's how we, continued
Yeah.
on in our relationship. And yeah, but I really, I that conversation that you coached me on was so pivotal for me to step into my own power and worth and value in a way I really never had. This is kind of a funny thing, but on our second date, he gave me like a bunch of dried flowers, like a little bunch, and I put it in my car. It was like lavender and some other stuff. It smelled nice. And I would use it to like stay a scientist, like around my dating, because I would look at it and be like, he's not texting me, but he likes me. Like I have proof that he's interested in me on my dashboard. And I
Yeah.
would look at it whenever I was feeling that spiral out of like, does he like me? Even if we had a date set up, you know what I mean? Like, even though all the reality was lined up, but my head would feel really stressed about it. I would just look at that little bunch of flowers and I'd be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
But it is so easy, I think, when we're dating to spin out on those types of things and to be, and then for us, a couple of weeks later, we had the commitment conversation and it was really clear by then that it was time to have it. And then we had all the big conversations actually really early, which is obviously how we got married. But it was really powerful to have that open conversation early. And so I'm sharing it with all of you because I want you to see it's like that's how we start to get the kind of relationships we really want, which is the emotionally available, open person who can just hang with you or up level you. Like Michael was actually always an up leveler. I would tell him something and then he would bring it to the next degree. I'd be like, I think that we should get married. And he'd say, well, I think we should move in first then. And I'd be like, oh my God, okay. He
Yeah.
would always, yeah, he would challenge me for sure, which is what I wanted in a partner. And I will say the funny thing is, and you might see this too sometimes, Andi, where strong women want a partner who will up level them, but then they get freaked out because all of a sudden they're now challenging and pushing them down the
Oh my
pathway too.
gosh. Yes. 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 I hear that's one of the biggest, what I like about the online dating and the Bumble process is that it can be manageable chunks.
Hmm.
Because what somebody says, it's just like the story of somebody that has never had any money wins the lottery. What happens to them, right? Like they are not at they can't handle it,
Right.
right? And so they're usually their life is just like destroyed. And so it's kind of the same thing, unfortunately, is if you've never been in a really, everyone has these dreams and these visions and they do these boards about this person that they want, but they've never even come close to anybody like that.
Mm,
Right. And so it's like you've got to start like taking that apart and taking it into manageable chunks. Just like the person with the lottery would have to go to a class on managing money and how to have boundaries and whatever, so that because it is too much like coming at once. You wouldn't even recognize it.
yes. I feel like that is so true because you are ready for that person when you're ready. Like I always look at Michael and the us meeting was at the time that both of us were actually ready for each other and neither of us was ready before
Right.
in terms of
And then
our
you do,
life
you're right.
experiences.
You have
Yeah.
these level up moments within the dating and then the relationship where you're like, okay, I said I wanted this, right? And now it's here. And then, yeah, there is a little bit of growth in there.
Well, I'm curious, we're here talking about dating, but the other piece that occurs to me as we were talking, because you were saying how you heal in the relationship. And I really kept that in mind during, especially the first few months when we were together, because old things would come up for me all the time. And that you can't really work through those things alone. And I feel like you told me that so many times. And would you expand on that a little bit? Like, how do you start to interrupt those patterns or start to, once you get into the relationship, because that is its own journey. Like, once you're in the relationship, there's a whole personal growth section that happens
Absolutely.
there. Hmm.
I have actually a personal story that's actually happening right now. Do you guys want to hear it?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Tell
So,
us.
yeah. And so, one of the things that it's a constant tape or struggle or story. And there's, is that when I'm in conversation with somebody, or I attract people close to me that don't want to know about me.
Mm.
They maybe want to know some day to day, but they don't like want to know about me. And especially I'm starting to get older. I'm about to be 54, and I'm really kind of like, I think there's some loss in there of like the person I was when I was 20 and 30. Like I used to be really adventurous, and I'm really not that person anymore. And I think I'm starting to want to like show that side of me or bring it up or something. It's quite interesting. Anyways, I had on Saturday, something came up. I was with my partner and we were having dinner, and I don't know how it was, but I'd gone to Mexico when I was 18 years old because I wanted to learn Spanish. And I went and I did it. I like went down there for like 2 months during the summer. I lived in like this community house. I went to a language school. I figured it all out. Anyways, I started to tell this to Greg, and I didn't get like any response from it. And I was like, huh. So then what I did in my head is like, okay, well, you're wanting like some sort of like validation from it. Maybe you should just give yourself that validation. So I went back into the room and I said, wow, I really have this like adventurous and brave side of me, like that showed up when I went to men. It was such an awkward like thing. And Greg goes, okay. And then I was still mad because he didn't keep asking me questions about it, like nothing. He was just like, so, I didn't want to like mess up the evening. So I was like, I'm going to handle this tomorrow. So then we moved on and we watched soccer game and all this kind of stuff. And so that the next day I brought it up to him. I said, hey, I want to talk to you about something. He knew something had gone on because he's like, is something going on? I'm like, I said, something is, but I don't want to talk about it now. Can we pivot it till tomorrow? So then when I talked to him about, I said, this is something that I was noticing. And so how do you do it is you notice, right? Like, and you stop and you talk about it. And that's the most important part is I talked about, but I didn't come from the place of you did this. That never works. Like I've really learned like this was my experience, right? When we speak from this was my experience of like what happened. Mm-hmm. And then I said, you have any like thoughts or comments on it? And he said, I do. And apparently, and this could be like really true. I haven't really fully like thought about it yet, but apparently he's like, you were actually like really vague and kind of, he's like, I couldn't tell if you actually wanted to talk about this time in Mexico. You really kind of like held back. And I kind of thought that you were trying to avoid the topic or give me any details. So I chose not to ask you anything about it. And that right there gave me something to think about, like how me, the people pleaser, the person without opinions, doesn't want to be too much, doesn't want to, how am I showing up that makes me give off the vibe that I don't want anybody to ask me things, but then it confirms the story in my head that nobody wants to know anything about me. I don't have all of the answers, but it really is about being able to notice, have a conversation of like what's internally going on with you, not what they're doing, and see if they've got any like vibe on it. And that to me is the recipe. And there's something in me that I need to evolve, and I'm not sure at this point what it is. But there's something about my communication that I'm not being seen because I'm not letting it. And it's probably to confirm that story that nobody sees me. So then I get mad and pouty or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love that's such a good story. It's such a good example. So thank you for sharing that, because there's like,
it's happening in real life.
Yeah, totally real time. Well, I think about that all the time with relationship, because, you get to this place where you still have to own your own worthiness and value. Like I would have stuff come up from my beta marriage and share it with Michael. And like, it would scare me to share those things with him, because I'm like, is he going to think I'm not ready or I'm too fresh from this or whatever? Like that stuff would come up. Or is he going to change his mind? Like, is he, even though he said all these things and wants to be with me, is he suddenly going to change his mind now because I'm telling him a story that is too raw and it's too much for him and he's going to decide I'm out, right? And that stuff would come up for me. And then I would just be like, okay, that's the worthiness journey. Like, you wanted a partner where you can be emotionally available, and you have to be available whatever the result is of that or not, right? And then he is so great, like he just would listen and nods and
Right.
moves forward, right? But it's an interesting practice because, like, that worthiness practice, I think again about those 2 months leading into Michael and I moving into a committed relationship, and then everything since then has been even more around being vulnerable and sharing and saying what my dreams were or what I wanted. And are you game for the things that I want? Do you want those things too? It's such an interesting evolution because I love how you say relationships are that container for development. If you really allow that. And I feel like for myself, this marriage has really allowed me to do that for the first time, like in a deeper level. And it's been really powerful.
Yeah, one of my friends, she was in a long distance relationship for um a while, and then like crossed the coasts, and then they moved in together. And I remember her saying, well, now I have a witness to my shittiness. And I thought that was like really, really strong, right? A lot of times, like,
Mhm.
I like, now I actually have a witness, like, for when I'm like not being my best or whatever, right? Like, I can't keep it like all control. I thought that was really kind of interesting.
Well, and I feel this way too, because, the partner is one of your closest, they're your closest person. Like, they see everything, they know so
Right.
much that other people don't see. And that opening, because even now, like, our relationship obviously is still evolving. And I'm like much more easeful with Michael than I ever was at the beginning. And I was like, have I changed? She's like, oh yeah. Like, you've opened up more, but it's like, because the trust has grown and I've felt more and more comfortable with him. And then the relationship has changed. And it's interesting, but then he does get obviously the other side, which is the not as nice side or the not as patient side doesn't live the way it used to. Like when you're first dating, you're like so much better about that stuff. And then
Totally. Totally.
you get to know
Totally.
each other and you're like, the snappiness can come out or the other things start to come out.
And you do get to evolve. Like, I grew up in this place where everything had to be, I don't want to say perfect, but like really presentable. Like I said, I think my
Mhm.
mom was just like this quintessential 50s woman, or grew up like under that, where it like makeup, slip, like all everything, house perfect. And I catch myself not like like sure, I like to have like a nice house, but I have a dog that sheds a lot. And so like Greg
Mhm.
wants to come over and like connect, but then I'm all like freaking out about like the dog hair and all this kind of stuff. And it's become like this block. Like when you were
Mm,
saying about not open, like I'm not saying that he needs to come in like dog hair all the time, but like it doesn't have to, I don't have to like put on a show when I'm talking about self-worth. I don't have to have it perfect
right.
in order to have connection.
Right.
And that has been something that I've really been able to work on in this relationship. I don't have to have it perfect. I don't have to have a meal ready or snacks or make every, like, he likes to come over all the time. And I'm just like, it's not perfect or whatever. I don't have a snack for you. I don't have your coconut water that you like. And he's like, it's okay. I'm coming to
Yeah.
see you. I'm not coming for like the appetizers, right? Like, and I've had to like really, because I've blocked it for years. He'd be like, why can't I just come over?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah. And you're like,
it's been really huge for me to let him come over with like the dog hair. I'm like, okay. Anyway,
come on in.
it's,
Come into the
yeah,
house.
right. I know. And it's really like, I have to let myself hear that. He wants to see me. And I'm like,
Totally.
okay.
Totally. And it's amazing. I feel like there's so many pieces around like that worth and evolution around
Yeah.
all of that. Like Michael loves, he cleans and he does it all the time. And he actually tries to get me to stop doing it because he would rather have me do things like computer things, which are things that are hard for him. And that's very easy for me. But he's like, That's hard for me. This is easy for me. Just like sit on the
Yeah.
couch, like you're fine. And then I have to just receive that. And that's a big thing for
Mhm.
me to be able to receive him just like helping all the time.
Totally.
Cause I'm like, I don't want it to build into resentment or a whole thing. And that's like old
Right.
stuff for me. But there is no resentment for him. He's like, fix my computer and I'll do the dishes and it's fine. And there's just like, I have to constantly be like, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
No, that's
Andi,
good
this has been,
stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's like we could just go on forever about relationships because I feel like it is really, I always think of it as like the most tender place for me in terms of my self worth journey. Because I feel like in terms of work and that place, like I've had a journey for sure in self worth there, and I have to constantly always watch it. But especially in relationships, because it is your home, it is the deepest. For me, it's always been like the deepest thing that I wanted and felt like I struggled with. And so when I wanted something so badly, it was hard for me to really say, okay, like this is actually a self worth thing because I was giving away my power just to
Yeah.
have something that I really wanted rather than saying, oh no, I can be powerful and have the thing that I want. But sometimes Michael and I joke about because we both have had obviously a past, and we're like, isn't it nice to be in a relationship where you feel really loved and secure? And we're both like, it's so nice
Yeah.
because we haven't either of us had really felt that before in a deep way. And I really credit you, Andi, for really moving me down that pathway and helping me
Oh,
to get that and anchor that in with him. So
that's so awesome. Yay.
yeah, well, it's
I
such an
love
honor
that
to
love
have you on. Well, we
story.
have rapid fire questions, so I'd still love to do
Okay.
those with you. Are
Yeah.
you
Let's do
ready?
it. Yeah.
She's like, yes. All right. Okay. What was the last thing you watched on TV?
Oh my God. I'm watching Succession season 4, episode 6, and I'm dragging it out.
Oh, you're not desperate to get to the end?
No, because I'll be really sad. Yeah, I'm super yogi person, but man, I love that messed up Roman Roy. God, he has the funniest things to say. He's just his one-liners. Oh my God, I'm gonna really miss him. I wish he and I were friends.
Awesome. Well, I've only watched a little bit of it, but I've heard amazing things about that last season. So, okay. What is on your nightstand?
Oh, not. Oh gosh. Okay, all my books are in the other room. I'm actually reading a really good book. But I've got my night guard because I clench my teeth.
Hmm.
I have a mask because I'm light sensitive if I'm taking a nap. I've got some cherryish lotion and I've got some lip balm. Like I think it's pomegranate, and then I got some really fun like eye cream that I
Nice.
got like at a farmer's market.
Beautiful. Awesome. So fun. Okay. And then when was the last time you tried something new and what was it?
When was the last time I tried something new? And what was it? I'm trying to think if I was doing something. Skateboarding.
Oh, wow.
Well,
That's
my son's
impressive.
home for the summer, and there's skateboards all over my living room.
So you've
And I
been,
tried to do an ollie, and it was terrible.
it's hard, right?
It's super hard. Like
Super hard.
yeah, and I'm also trying to. So I'm trying to do math in a different way. That was actually like last night. The skateboarding was actually earlier this week, but there's like this. I'm on Instagram. There's this guy who teaches how to do like subtraction without borrowing. You do this under. I don't even know what he's doing, and so I'm trying to learn how to do math in a different way because I never really got math. Like
Hmm.
math has always been a really struggle for me, and he teaches these ways that are they seem counterintuitive. I don't know. They seem easier, so I'm trying
Yeah.
that.
That's funny. That's interesting. I haven't studied math in a long time, except unless you
Oh, it's
count.
pretty fun. I'll send you
Yeah.
like the thing, but you'll be like, "Oh my god, is that really how you could do it?" Besides like the old-fashioned way of like
Yeah.
borrowing or even like adding fractions with like mixed numbers. Like he has this way. I'm like, "Oh my god."
That's
Anyway, so
cool.
I'm gonna say that over the skateboarding. The skateboarding is mostly like tricks inside because it's
That's
hot
still
outside.
fun. I like
Yeah.
that. That's fun. Yeah. Okay. Last one. What are your top three most used emojis on your phone?
It'll definitely be like shaka.
The
Hold
which one?
on. The shaka where you go
Oh,
like
yeah.
root. Yeah. Oh, I've been doing this one, the heart, the one that goes like heart. So it's shaka, heart, and then definitely some sort of like crying or LOL because that's
Yes.
always happening. I
Awesome.
do the crying LOL, like this one, like combo. But I do the
Yeah.
heart, and then this one is always like a big one for
A standard. Yeah.
me.
Awesome. Well, Andi, it was such a joy to have you on. I feel like I talk about you all the time in life or to
Oh,
my clients. And
thank
so it's so
you.
fun to get to share you and your wisdom
Yeah.
on the podcast. And I've learned so much from you. So it's just super great to have you here where you can share with everybody else what you do. So
Thank you so
powerful.
much. It's been awesome. It really has.
Yeah.
And I hope that people listen and feel like taking a chance and
Mm,
trying to like rethink. Try not to listen to the haters. There's just this whole uh, negative vibe on online dating, and it can actually be like something quite amazing for you if you put the right lens on it.
totally. I mean, it's how I met my husband. So
Yeah,
I
it's how
am, yeah.
everybody is.
Yeah.
It's here to stay, and it's so.
Yes. Awesome. I love that. Inspirational words for those of you who out there who are dating. And we'll link in the show notes ways to reach Andi if you're like, I want a little help. We'll put that in there
Yeah. Oh my
for
gosh, that'd be
you.
great.
And yes. And Andi, thank you so much for being part of my life and coming onto the show. I'm
Yeah.
so
Oh my
grateful for
gosh,
you.
thank you.